Hi, everybody, and welcome back. This session has two primary focuses. The first is on adolescence. This would be ages 12 to roughly 18, 19, 20 years old. And then the second focus is going to be on identity formation during that time. But before we jump into adolescence and identity, I want to explain how all the various components of early childhood, such as the attachment theories and the parenting styles and the discipline styles and so on, how these all really come together. And what does this really look like in that adolescent child? And what does this really mean as they work their way through adolescence and move more into early adulthood? So keep in mind that the goal of raising children is really to get them to this place. It's that late adolescent stage that we want to see our kids being able to be healthy and functional, have decision-making ability, know what it looks like to contribute to society. But really, by the time they reach early adulthood, the rest is kind of on them. As parents, we've done what we can to mold our kids into what they can and want to be, but then it's up to them. We have a lot less influence as these kids work their way through adulthood, as of course we all know. But by hearing and seeing how all of these different theories come together and what this really looks like, what this raising children puzzle, all these pieces that come together, how it all kind of holds its place. It's so fascinating, and it's incredibly important to understand some of these fundamental or foundational things as we seek to understand individuals. Keep in mind that above all else, one of the main reasons people study psychology is so that we can attempt to understand psychological and behavioral responses in people. And to study psychology is to study people. Keep in mind that we interact with people every day in most cases. This can be across work, it can be across social circles and neighborhoods and online. Now there's this huge movement of how to have interactions, quality interactions virtually, now that so many of us are virtual. But really, to understand some of these things, I'm going to take us back to the basics a little bit. So we're going to start at the beginning of psychology. This is where Sigmund Freud developed one of the first major theories of child development in psychology. This would be Freud's psychosexual stages of development. This basically includes ages birth up through later adolescence. But in short, Freud's theory really boiled down to the meeting of basic needs. And his stance on personality development was that by the time a child reached the end of adolescence, their personality was mostly set in stone. That any event or experience that occurred during those 5 psychosexual stages of development were pretty much what is going to influence them in adulthood. Now, I'm going to jump over to from Freud over to Erikson's theory of child development. Erikson was a theorist, came about 45, 50 years after Freud, and his work, of course, was strongly influenced by Freud, like the majority of theorists during that time. But his theory maintained that psychosocial development, or the social factors, individual thoughts and behaviors, did not end after Freud's 5th stage of development. Rather, that personality development continued on through adulthood, and that person's experiences were primarily what was shaping their personality. This would include the impact of social experiences across an entire lifespan. So Erikson really took that perspective of, our personality, while it was molded, it can be shaped and it can be moved as we continue to grow and learn more. Fundamentally, Freud's theory really focused around the meeting of basic needs, while Erikson focused on the interaction between the two. A quick example would be a mother feeding its child. Freud's focus is on the actual act of feeding and was the child satisfied. Erikson's focus was really on the interaction between mother and child as it was feeding. Hopefully you can see that distinction. So now think back to Bowlby's attachment theories. John Bowlby, he was also strongly influenced by Freud's work, and he too believed that the earliest experiences had a lasting effect on development. The attachment theory deals with the child's tie to its caregivers and seeks to understand and explain the differences really in that quality of attachment. That's really what the purpose of the attachment theory was. With Freud's theory, he placed little emphasis on the social aspect of early childhood. He was more of the perspective that the attachment would occur if the child was satisfied by the feeding or by their basic needs being met. While Erikson placed his emphasis less on physical needs being met and more on that social aspect or that behavioral response. So Bowlby and Erikson were far more aligned in philosophy than Bowlby and Freud. So we learned that the attachment to caregivers as a child likely acted as an indicator as to how that child would then attach to other individuals as they continued to grow and work their way through adolescence. So in one sense, one's attachment style became their foundation for that individual to then start developing their own identity. So here's another distinction. Bowlby focused on the early childhood stages of development with the attachment theory. With Erikson, he spent so much of his work focusing on the interactions and people becoming their own based on social and cultural influences, and that this adolescent period was really very, very much influenced by what was going on, by interactions, by their own opinions and perspectives, and really experiences that they were having during that time frame. But the way in which people became their own was reliant upon the way they attached to caregivers as children. So hopefully you're starting to see how some of this stuff all comes together. So now add in parenting styles and discipline, the way that one was parented. This is also a huge contributing factor to attachment style. So now you can see, hopefully, how all of these things kind of play off of each other and why the adolescents make decisions and do things in an attempt to find their own way. So for example, if you have a parent who demonstrated an authoritarian parenting style with their child, as children, that parent likely received low levels of parental warmth. They experienced inconsistent caretaking and possibly rejection from their parents. Therefore, their lack of responsiveness now to their children were due to an insecure attachment style with their parents. I'll break this down one step further. Authoritarian style equals stern, strict, do as I say, not as I do type of mentality. Low levels of parental warmth equals child gets a cut on their knee, parents do not console the tearful child. Inconsistent caretaking and rejection equals low care, overprotection, or unhealthy emotional behavioral responses when an accident occurs, breaking a glass, dropping a cup of milk, for lack of a better way to put it, dropping something on the floor. Seeing that emotional or behavioral response from their parent is also very impacting to that child as they learn what it looks like to respond, to act and respond in certain circumstances. So now, where does identity formation really come into play with all this? So we will pick that up in the next video.